There's a particular kind of person who can destroy your psyche from the inside out, and Carl Jung knew exactly how they do it. Not through obvious cruelty or direct attack. That would be too simple, too easy to defend against. No, the narcissist destroys through a slow poisoning of your reality, a gradual replacement of your thoughts with theirs, your feelings with theirs, your very self with a version they've constructed for their own purposes. Jung spent decades studying these psychological vampires, and what he discovered should terrify anyone who values their sanity. Jung understood that narcissists aren't just people with big egos or excessive self-love. They're individuals with a fundamental split in their psyche, a grandiose false self covering a void where authentic self should be. This isn't confidence, it's a performance. This isn't self-love, it's self-absence. And that absence, that void, needs to be filled constantly with what Jung called narcissistic supply. Admiration, attention, control, and most devastatingly, the psychological essence of others. The first red flag Jung identified is what he called the persona inflation, when someone's mask becomes so overdeveloped that it consumes everything else. Watch how they present themselves in the first few meetings. Is it too perfect, too charming, too interested in everything you say? Normal people have awkward moments, contradictions, uncertainties. But the narcissist's initial presentation is flawless because it's not real. It's a carefully constructed persona designed to draw you in. I watched this happen to a colleague who met someone at a conference. The man seemed perfect, successful, charming, fascinated by her work. He mirrored her interests so perfectly, it felt like destiny. Within weeks, he'd moved into her life completely. Within months, she'd quit her job to support his career. Within a year, she was unrecognizable. Anxious, depleted, constantly apologizing for things that weren't her fault. The perfect beginning was the trap. Jung would say she'd been consumed by someone who needed her life force because they had none of their own. The mirroring that feels like connection is actually reconnaissance. The narcissist studies you not to know you, but to become what you want. To reflect back your own ideal image so you fall in love with yourself through them. Jung called this projection hijacking. They figure out what you're projecting and embody it perfectly, making you psychologically dependent on them to access parts of yourself. Another critical red flag is the speed of intimacy. The narcissist needs to establish control quickly before you have time to see through the facade. They'll share vulnerable stories that aren't really vulnerable. Calculated revelations designed to fast-track intimacy. They'll push for commitment, declarations of love, major life decisions at a pace that feels exhilarating but is actually predatory. Jung understood that real intimacy develops slowly, organically. Forced intimacy is always about control. Watch how they talk about their past relationships. Everyone else was crazy, abusive, didn't understand them. They're always the victim, never the perpetrator. Jung would identify this as projection of the shadow. The narcissist cannot acknowledge their own destructive behavior, so they project it onto everyone around them. Those crazy exes were probably people who saw through the facade and paid the price for it. The narcissist's emotional range is peculiarly limited, though they can simulate emotions they don't feel. Jung noticed they experience what he called pseudo-emotions, displays of feeling calculated for effect rather than genuine emotional responses. They can cry on cue when it serves them, but remain unmoved by your genuine distress. They can rage when challenged, but feel no real anger, just the cold calculation that rage might regain control. Here's a red flag most people miss: the subtle punishment for independence. Every time you make a decision without them, have an experience without them, succeed without their help, there's a consequence. Not obvious anger. That would be too revealing. Instead, they become distant, develop mysterious illnesses, have crises that require your attention. Jung recognized this as the narcissist's terror of abandonment, fighting with their need to appear independent. They must control you, but can't appear controlling. The gaslighting begins immediately, but imperceptibly. Small contradictions of your memory, slight revisions of events you both witnessed, gentle suggestions that you're too sensitive, misunderstanding, overreacting. Jung understood that the narcissist needs to destabilize your relationship with reality itself, because a person who trusts their own perception can't be controlled. They need you to doubt yourself more than you trust them, making them the arbiter of what's real. Notice the relationship with truth. For the narcissist, truth is entirely instrumental. It's only valuable if it serves their purposes. They'll lie about things that don't matter, just to see if they can. They'll tell different versions of the same story to different people, not caring if the stories contradict. Jung saw this as evidence of the fundamental split in their psyche. Without an authentic self, there's no consistent truth, just whatever narrative serves the false self in that moment. The idealization-devaluation cycle is a massive red flag that Jung documented extensively. First, you're perfect, the best thing that ever happened to them, their soulmate. Then, gradually or suddenly, you're disappointing, failing, not who they thought you were. This isn't about you changing. It's about the narcissist's inability to maintain the idealization once they've secured your submission. Jung understood that they can only relate to others as either perfect mirrors or worthless objects, nothing in between. Watch what happens when they're not the center of attention. At your birthday party, they'll have a crisis. During your promotion celebration, they'll pick a fight. When you're sick, they'll be sicker. Jung recognized this as the narcissist's inability to tolerate being peripheral in anyone's psychological landscape. They must be the sun around which others orbit, or they experience what he called narcissistic injury, a wound to the false self that feels like death. The narcissist's empathy is purely cognitive, never emotional. They can understand what you're feeling well enough to manipulate it, but they don't feel with you. Jung distinguished between intellectual empathy, understanding emotions as information, and affective empathy, actually experiencing emotional resonance with others. The narcissist has the first, but entirely lacks the second, making them dangerous because they understand your vulnerabilities without caring about your pain. Here's a red flag that's often mistaken for passion: the intense jealousy disguised as love. They're not jealous because they value you. They're jealous because you're their possession, their source of supply. Jung understood that the narcissist experiences others not as separate beings, but as extensions of themselves. Your independence isn't betrayal of the relationship. It's betrayal of their psychological structure that requires you to be an appendage of their false self. The narcissist creates what Jung called participation mystique, a psychological fusion where boundaries dissolve. But unlike healthy intimacy, where two whole people choose connection, this is parasitic fusion, where one person feeds off the other. You'll find yourself unable to think clearly when they're around, unsure where you end and they begin, losing your own thoughts and replacing them with what they want you to think. Watch how they handle your success. A normal person who loves you celebrates your achievements. The narcissist sees your success as theft of attention that rightfully belongs to them. They'll minimize your accomplishments, find flaws in your triumphs, or immediately redirect focus to their own superior achievements. Jung recognized that the narcissist cannot tolerate others' success because it challenges their grandiose false self that must always be supreme. The smear campaign begins long before you realize you're being smeared. They plant seeds of doubt about you in others' minds through concerned comments, worried observations, reluctant criticisms. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm worried about their drinking, mental health behavior. By the time you realize what's happening, your support network has been poisoned against you. Jung saw this as the narcissist's preemptive strike against being exposed. Physical symptoms often emerge in relationships with narcissists: chronic fatigue, digestive issues, autoimmune problems, anxiety disorders. Jung understood that the psyche and body are one system. When someone is psychologically parasitizing you, your body knows even if your conscious mind doesn't. Those mysterious illnesses that develop in the narcissist's presence are your body's warning system that something is draining your life force. The narcissist's rage when challenged is unlike normal anger. It's what Jung called narcissistic rage. Not hot emotion, but cold annihilation. They don't just want to win the argument. They want to psychologically destroy you for daring to challenge their false self. This rage can be explosive or silent, but it's always disproportionate because you haven't just disagreed with them. You've threatened their entire psychological structure. Here's the red flag that seals your fate if you ignore it: the moment they reveal their contempt. It might be a look of disgust they can't quite hide, a cruel comment they immediately retract, a moment where the mask slips and you see the void behind it. Jung knew that contempt is the opposite of love, and narcissists ultimately feel contempt for anyone who loves them because they know, unconsciously, that they're unlovable. Anyone who loves them must be worthless. The trauma bond that forms with a narcissist is particularly insidious. The intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable alternation between affection and cruelty, creates an addiction stronger than any drug. Your nervous system becomes wired to their patterns, making leaving feel like death, even when staying is killing you. Jung understood this as a form of psychological possession, where your psyche becomes colonized by theirs. The final red flag is often the hardest to see: your own diminishment. You become smaller around them, less yourself, more what they need you to be. Your interests fade, your friendships wither, your confidence evaporates. Jung would say your authentic self is being systematically murdered to feed their false self. You're being psychologically cannibalized by someone who needs your essence because they have none of their own. Jung's ultimate warning about narcissists is this: they don't get better. The false self is a prison they can't escape because escaping would mean facing the void beneath it. And that void is unbearable. They'll destroy unlimited others rather than face themselves. Your love won't heal them because the wound isn't lack of love, but lack of self. You can't give them what doesn't exist in them. The destruction a narcissist causes isn't accidental or incidental. It's necessary for their psychological survival. They must diminish others to maintain their grandiosity. They must control others to avoid abandonment. They must project their darkness onto others to avoid seeing it in themselves. Your destruction is the price of their survival, and they'll pay it without hesitation. If you recognize these red flags in someone close to you, Jung would say you're in psychological danger, not metaphorical danger. Actual danger to your psyche, your sense of self, your ability to trust reality. The narcissist doesn't just hurt you, they colonize you, replace you, erase you. They don't just take from you, they take you piece by piece until there's nothing left but a shell that serves their needs. The only defense Jung offers is consciousness. Seeing clearly, naming accurately, refusing to participate in the delusion. The narcissist's power depends on your unconsciousness, your projection, your hope that they'll change. But consciousness is painful because it means seeing that the person you love doesn't exist, was never real, was always just a performance designed to capture you. These red flags aren't warnings about difficult people or challenging relationships. They're warnings about psychological predators who feed on others' authenticity because they have none of their own. Ignore them, and Jung promises you'll pay with parts of yourself you might never recover. See them clearly, and you might escape before the destruction is complete. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. Every moment you spend with a narcissist is a moment they're feeding on your psychological essence, replacing your thoughts with theirs, your reality with theirs, yourself with a version that serves them. And once that process is complete, Jung knew, recovering your authentic self becomes the work of years, sometimes decades, sometimes never. The red flags are there, waving in the psychological wind. The question isn't whether you see them, but whether you'll have the courage to believe what you see and act on it before it's too late. Because with narcissists, it's always later than you think. The destruction begins the moment they identify you as supply, and it doesn't stop until either they've consumed you entirely or you've escaped their psychological gravitational pull. Choose consciousness. Choose clarity. Choose yourself. Because if you don't, the narcissist will choose for you. And their choice is always your destruction in service of their survival.